Elena had always known she was different, but she never imagined it would cost her everything. Born in the small village of Millbrook, she possessed a gift that both amazed and terrified those around her. With just a touch, she could heal wounds that should have taken weeks to mend. A gentle press of her palm against a broken bone would make it whole again. Fevers that burned through children's bodies would fade under her caring hands. For 17 years, Elena lived quietly with her grandmother, Martha, who had raised her since her parents died in a plague when she was barely 3 years old. Martha warned her constantly to keep her abilities hidden, to only use them when absolutely necessary, and never in front of strangers. The old woman had seen enough of the world to know that gifts like Elena's were often seen as threats by those in power. The village of Millbrook sat nestled between rolling green hills and a dense forest that stretched for miles. Most of the villagers were farmers, blacksmiths, or merchants who traveled the trade routes. They knew about Elena's healing touch, but they protected her secret fiercely. She had saved their children, healed their livestock, and mended their broken hearts when grief threatened to consume them. To them, she was a blessing sent by the gods themselves. Thomas was one of those who had known Elena since childhood. The blacksmith's son had grown from a scrawny boy into a strong young man with broad shoulders and gentle brown eyes. He had loved Elena for as long as he could remember, though he had never found the courage to tell her. Every morning, he would find excuses to walk past her grandmother's cottage, hoping to catch a glimpse of her tending to the herb garden or hanging laundry on the line. Elena felt the same pull toward Thomas, though she kept her feelings buried deep inside her heart. She believed that her gift made her different in ways that would always separate her from normal people. How could she ask someone to share a life filled with the constant fear of discovery? How could she burden Thomas with the danger that seemed to follow her wherever she went? The trouble began on a gray autumn morning when a royal messenger arrived in Millbrook. The man wore the deep purple and gold colors of King Marcus, and his horse was lathered with sweat from hard riding. The entire village gathered in the town square as the messenger unrolled his scroll and began to read in a voice that carried across the silent crowd. By order of His Royal Majesty, King Marcus III, any person found to possess magical abilities is hereby declared an enemy of the realm. Such individuals are to be brought to the capital immediately for questioning and judgment. Anyone found harboring or protecting a magic user will face the same punishment. A reward of 1,000 gold pieces will be paid for information leading to the capture of any magic user. The words hit the villagers like physical blows. They had heard rumors of the king's new laws, stories of people disappearing in the night, whispers of execution pyres burning in the capital city. But Millbrook had felt safe, hidden away from the main roads and royal attention. Now that safety was shattered. The messenger continued reading, describing the signs of magic use and the methods for reporting suspected individuals. When he finished, he looked around the crowd with sharp, calculating eyes. Remember, citizens, loyalty to the crown means reporting anything suspicious. The king's reach extends to every corner of the realm. After the messenger left, the village fell into an uneasy quiet. Elena felt the weight of every gaze, though most villagers quickly looked away when she met their eyes. She knew they would never betray her, but the fear was there now, hanging over everyone like a dark cloud. That evening, Elena sat with her grandmother in their small cottage, staring into the fireplace as flames danced and flickered. Martha's weathered hands shook as she poured tea, and Elena could see the worry etched deep in the lines of her face. "We have to leave," Martha said quietly. "Tonight, before word spreads any further. There are caves in the northern mountains where we could hide until this madness passes." Elena shook her head. "Grandmother, you're too old for such a journey. The mountains are dangerous, and winter is coming. We wouldn't survive a week out there." "Better to die free in the mountains than burn in the king's pyres," Martha replied, her voice firm despite her fear. "Child, you don't understand what men like King Marcus are capable of. I've lived through other purges, other times when fear made people do terrible things. This won't end with just a few arrests. It will spread like wildfire until neighbor turns against neighbor." Before Elena could respond, a soft knock came at their door. Both women froze, hearts pounding. Martha slowly moved to the window and peered through the curtains. Her shoulders relaxed slightly when she saw Thomas standing on their doorstep, shifting nervously from foot to foot. Elena opened the door, and Thomas stepped inside quickly, glancing over his shoulder as if he expected to see soldiers following him. His face was pale, and his hands trembled slightly as he removed his cap. "Elena, you have to listen to me," he said urgently. "My father sent me to warn you. There's talk in the village. Not everyone is as loyal as we hoped. Samuel the merchant is planning to send word to the capital about you. He thinks the reward money could set him up for life." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. Samuel had always been greedy, but she never thought he would betray someone who had helped his family. She had healed his wife's broken arm just 2 winters ago, probably saving the woman from permanent disability. "When?" Martha asked, already moving toward the chest where they kept their few valuable possessions. "Tomorrow morning," Thomas replied. "He's waiting for the next royal courier to pass through. My father overheard him talking to his wife about what he would buy with the reward money." Elena sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the reality of her situation. Everything was happening so fast. Just that morning, her biggest worry had been whether the late harvest would provide enough herbs for winter medicine. Now she was a fugitive, hunted by the most powerful man in the kingdom. "There's more," Thomas continued, his voice growing even more serious. The messenger wasn't just making announcements. He was asking questions, gathering information about unusual healings or unexplained recoveries. "Someone must have already sent word to the king about strange happenings in our area." Martha stopped packing and turned to face them. "Then, we're already too late. If the king knows about this region, he'll send hunters. Professional witchfinders who know how to track magic users. We need to move tonight." Elena looked between her grandmother and Thomas, seeing the fear and desperation in their faces. She made a decision that would change everything. "No," she said firmly. "I won't run and hide while good people suffer because of me. If the king wants me, then he can come and face me himself. But I won't let innocent villagers pay the price for protecting me." Thomas stepped forward, his brown eyes blazing with determination. "Then, you won't face this alone. Whatever happens, I'm staying with you." Martha shook her head frantically. "Children, you don't understand. This isn't about courage or making a stand. The king has armies, professional soldiers, weapons designed to contain and kill magic users. You can't fight an entire kingdom." Elena reached out and took Thomas's hand, feeling the calluses from years of working at the forge. His skin was warm and rough, completely human and normal, yet somehow that touch gave her more strength than her magical abilities ever had. "Maybe we can't fight a kingdom," she said softly. "But we can protect the people we love. And maybe, if we're smart and careful, we can find a way to survive until things change." Outside, the wind began to howl through the trees, and the first drops of rain spattered against the windows. In the distance, Elena thought she could hear the sound of hoofbeats on the road, though it might have been her imagination. Either way, she knew their quiet life in Millbrook was over. The hunt had begun, and there was no turning back. As the night grew darker and the storm gathered strength, Elena made plans that would test every ounce of her courage and cunning. She had no way of knowing that hundreds of miles away, King Marcus was already assembling his most elite hunters, men who had made careers out of tracking down and capturing magic users. The king had heard whispers of a healer in the countryside, someone whose abilities far exceeded normal herbalism or medicine. Such a person represented everything he feared most about magic users. They gathered followers, inspired loyalty, and reminded people that there were powers in the world beyond royal authority. Elena would soon discover that her quiet village life had made her unprepared for the brutal realities of royal politics and the lengths to which desperate men would go to maintain their power. But she would also discover reserves of strength and cleverness she never knew she possessed. The boy who loved her would prove to be her greatest ally, and together they would embark on a journey that would test not only their survival skills but the very foundations of their love for each other. The storm was just beginning, and Elena had no idea how much her world was about to change. 3 days after the royal messenger's visit, Elena's worst fears came true. She woke before dawn to the sound of horses thundering through the village streets, accompanied by the harsh shouts of soldiers and the crash of doors being kicked open. From her window, she could see torches moving between the houses like angry fireflies in the pre-dawn darkness. Thomas had spent the previous night hidden in their root cellar, and Martha had barely slept, sitting by the window with a kitchen knife in her lap. Now, as the sounds of the search grew closer, Elena knew their time had run out. "They're here," she whispered, shaking Thomas awake. "The king's hunters have found us." Thomas bolted upright, instantly alert despite having slept only a few hours. Through the thin walls of the cottage, they could hear Captain Roderick Blackwood calling out orders to his men. Blackwood was the king's most feared witch hunter, a man who had personally captured over 50 magic users in the past 3 years. His reputation for cruelty was matched only by his skill at tracking his prey. "Search every house," Blackwood commanded in a voice like gravel. "Check the cellars, the attics, anywhere someone might hide. Remember, the girl has healing powers, so look for signs of recent medical work. Bandages, herbs, anything that suggests someone has been treated for injuries." Elena's heart sank as she heard his words. The village was full of evidence of her healing work. Just last week, she had helped deliver Farmer Brown's baby when the birth went wrong. 2 days ago, she had treated a deep cut on young Peter's arm after he fell from a tree. The signs were everywhere if someone knew what to look for. Martha appeared at Elena's side, moving surprisingly quickly for her age. "There's a loose board in the back wall," she whispered urgently. "Your grandfather built a hiding space there during the last war. It leads to a tunnel that comes out near the forest edge." "I won't leave you," Elena protested, but Martha cut her off with a fierce look. "Child, I'm 73 years old. I've lived my life, and it's been a good one. You have decades ahead of you, and the world needs healers like you. Don't waste my sacrifice by being stubborn." Thomas was already prying up the floorboards, revealing the narrow tunnel beneath. It was barely wide enough for one person to crawl through, and thick with spider webs and the musty smell of long disuse. The sound of soldiers reached their front door, and someone began pounding on the wooden frame. "Open up! By order of the king." Elena kissed her grandmother's weathered cheek, tasting the salt of tears on her lips. "I love you, grandmother. Thank you for everything." "Go," Martha whispered fiercely. "Live. Love. Use your gifts to help others, no matter what it costs you. That's how you honor my sacrifice." Thomas squeezed through the opening first, then reached back to help Elena down. As they began crawling through the narrow tunnel, they could hear Martha opening the front door, speaking in a voice that sounded convincingly sleepy and confused. "Good morning, soldiers. Is there some trouble? It's very early for visitors." Captain Blackwood's voice was cold and professional. "We're searching for a magic user reported to be in this village. A healer with unusual abilities. Have you seen anything suspicious?" Elena wanted to stop and listen, but Thomas kept pulling her forward through the tunnel. The passage seemed to stretch forever, filled with roots and rocks that scraped against their skin. Behind them, they could hear the soldiers entering the cottage, their heavy boots thundering across the floor. When they finally emerged from the tunnel, they found themselves in a thick grove of pine trees about 100 yards from the village edge. Dawn was breaking over the hills, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Under different circumstances, Elena might have found the sight beautiful. Now it only meant that their escape would be visible to anyone who looked in their direction. Thomas helped her to her feet, and they stood for a moment listening to the sounds from the village. Dogs were barking, and they could hear Captain Blackwood shouting orders. Then came a sound that made Elena's blood run cold, her grandmother's voice, raised in obvious pain. "Tell us where she is, old woman. We know the healer lived in this house. Don't force us to make this unpleasant for you." Elena started back toward the tunnel, but Thomas caught her arm. "Elena, no. If you go back now, her sacrifice means nothing. We have to keep moving." "They're hurting her," Elena said, tears streaming down her face. "I have to help her." "You can't save her by getting captured yourself," Thomas replied, his own voice thick with grief. The best way to honor what she's doing is to escape and stay alive. They heard Martha's voice again, weaker now but still defiant. I don't know where she went. Even if I did, I wouldn't tell you. Some things are more important than my old bones. Captain Blackwood's response was too quiet to hear, but the tone carried clearly enough. Elena forced herself to turn away from the village and follow Thomas deeper into the forest. Every step felt like a betrayal, but she knew he was right. Going back now would only ensure that both she and Martha suffered. They had been walking for about an hour when they heard the pursuit behind them. The baying of hunting hounds echoed through the trees, growing steadily closer. Blackwood had brought tracker dogs, specially trained to follow the scent of magic users. Elena had heard stories about these animals, bred and trained to be particularly sensitive to the strange energy that surrounded people with magical abilities. This way, Thomas said, leading her toward a stream that wound through the forest. If we walk in the water for a while, it might throw off their scent. They waded into the icy stream, gasping as the cold water soaked through their shoes and clothing. The current was stronger than it looked, and Elena had to concentrate to keep from slipping on the smooth rocks beneath her feet. Behind them, the sound of the dogs was getting closer. Thomas, Elena said as they struggled upstream, why are you doing this? You could go back to the village, tell them you had nothing to do with my escape. You could have a normal life. Thomas stopped walking and turned to face her, water swirling around his knees. His brown eyes were serious and filled with more love than Elena had ever seen directed at her. Elena, I've loved you since we were children. Not because of your healing powers, not because you're special or different, but because of who you are. You're kind and brave and good, and you've spent your whole life putting others before yourself. If you think I'm going to abandon you now, when you need help the most, then you don't know me at all. Elena felt her heart swell with emotions she had been holding back for years. Even in the middle of their desperate flight, surrounded by danger and uncertainty, Thomas's words filled her with warmth. She reached up and touched his cheek, feeling the rough stubble beneath her palm. I love you too, she whispered. I've always loved you. I was just scared that caring about me would put you in danger. Everything worth having involves some risk, Thomas replied, covering her hand with his own. And you're worth any danger. Their moment was interrupted by the sound of dogs much closer than before. Thomas grabbed Elena's hand, and they began moving upstream again, faster now despite the slippery rocks and cold water. They had been walking in the stream for nearly 2 hours when they came upon something that changed everything. Ahead of them, the water disappeared into a dark opening in a rocky hillside. It was a cave, hidden behind a curtain of hanging vines and moss. We can hide in there, Thomas suggested, but Elena shook her head. Caves are traps. If they find us, there's no way out. She paused, studying the landscape around them. But maybe we can use it differently. Elena's idea was risky, but it was also clever. They waded past the cave entrance and continued upstream for another half-mile before climbing out of the water. Then, they carefully made their way back through the forest, moving parallel to the stream but staying well away from the water. When they reached the area near the cave again, they climbed up the hillside until they were positioned directly above the hidden entrance. From their hiding spot among the rocks and trees, they had a clear view of the stream below. It wasn't long before Captain Blackwood and his men appeared, following the water trail just as Elena and Thomas had hoped they would. Blackwood was a tall, lean man with graying hair and cold blue eyes. He wore the black leather armor of the king's elite forces, and a sword hung at his side that Elena could see was etched with symbols designed to disrupt magical energy. This was a man who had made hunting people like her into both an art and a science. The trail goes cold here, one of his soldiers reported, standing knee-deep in the stream near the cave entrance. The dogs are confused. They keep circling back to this spot. Blackwood studied the area carefully, his experienced eyes taking in every detail. Elena held her breath, praying that he wouldn't notice anything suspicious about their hiding place. Check the cave, Blackwood ordered. Carefully. If they're in there, I want them taken alive. The king has special plans for this healer. 2 soldiers disappeared into the dark opening behind the vines. Elena could hear them splashing around inside, their voices echoing off stone walls. After several minutes, they emerged shaking their heads. "Empty, sir. Just an old cave, probably used by bears during winter." Blackwood frowned, clearly frustrated. "The trail can't just disappear. Search the area more carefully. Look for any place they might have climbed out of the water." For the next hour, Elena and Thomas watched as the soldiers combed through the forest around the stream. Several times, searchers passed within just a few feet of their hiding place. Elena's heart hammered so hard she was sure it would give them away, but somehow they remained undetected. Finally, as the sun reached its peak overhead, Captain Blackwood called off the search. "We'll return to the village and question more residents. Someone must have seen which direction they went. Post guards on all the major roads leading out of the area. If they try to reach another settlement, we'll catch them." As the soldiers disappeared back through the trees, Elena and Thomas remained hidden for another hour, making sure the pursuit was really gone. When they finally climbed down from their hiding place, both of them were shaking from exhaustion and relief. "What now?" Thomas asked. "We can't go back to Millbrook, and every other village will be watched." Elena looked around at the vast forest stretching in every direction. Somewhere out there was a king who wanted her dead and professional hunters who would never stop tracking her. But she also knew that there were people who needed her help, people who were suffering while she hid in the woods. "We find a way to fight back," she said firmly. "I won't spend my life running and hiding while King Marcus hurts innocent people. There has to be other magic users out there, other people who refuse to bow down to his tyranny. We find them, and we make a stand." Thomas nodded, understanding the determination in her voice. "Where do we start?" Elena thought about stories her grandmother had told her, tales of hidden communities and secret networks that had existed during other dark times in the kingdom's history. "The old ruins," she said. "Grandmother used to tell me about places where people could gather safely, where the old magic still protected those who needed shelter. We find those places, and we find allies." As they set off deeper into the forest, Elena felt a mixture of fear and hope warring in her chest. Behind them lay everything familiar and safe. Ahead lay unknown dangers and uncertain futures. But she was no longer alone, and that made all the difference. Thomas walked beside her, his hand in hers, ready to face whatever came next. Together, they began the journey that would either destroy them or transform them into something the king had never expected, not just fugitives running from his power, but rebels ready to challenge it. The hunt continued, but now the prey was learning to fight back. 2 months after their escape from Millbrook, Elena and Thomas had discovered that the world was far more dangerous and complex than either of them had imagined. They had also discovered that they were not alone in their fight against King Marcus and his brutal persecution of magic users. Deep in the Thornwood Mountains, hidden within a valley that seemed to exist between the folds of reality itself, they had found the sanctuary of the ancient grove. It was a place where magic itself seemed to live in the very stones and trees, where people with abilities like Elena's could gather without fear of discovery. The sanctuary was led by a woman named Sage Morwen, a healer whose powers far exceeded even Elena's considerable abilities. Morwen was perhaps 60 years old, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that seemed to hold centuries of wisdom. She had been fighting against magical persecution for most of her adult life, and she welcomed Elena and Thomas as valuable additions to her growing resistance movement. "The king fears us because he understands something that many people don't," Morwen explained to Elena during one of their training sessions. "Magic isn't just about power. It's about connection, about understanding that there are forces in the world greater than any crown or throne. When people see healers save lives that medicine can't touch, or weather workers bring rain to drought-stricken fields, they start to question whether kings are really as important as they claim to be." Elena had spent her weeks at the sanctuary learning not just to control her healing abilities, but to expand them in ways she never thought possible. Under Morwen's guidance, she discovered she could sense illness and injury from a distance, could draw poison from wounds without even touching them, and could share her strength with others who were weakened by injury or disease. Thomas, meanwhile, had been training with Marcus Flynn, a former royal guard who had fled the capital when he refused to participate in the magical purges. Flynn taught Thomas how to fight with sword and bow, how to move silently through forests and cities, and how to gather intelligence without being detected. The blacksmith's son had proven to have a natural talent for both combat and stealth. "Your boy has good instincts," Flynn told Elena one evening as they watched Thomas sparring with other trainees. "He's brave, but not reckless. Smart, but not overthinking. And he's got something even more valuable than skill, he's got something worth fighting for." Elena knew exactly what Flynn meant. Thomas's love for her had given him a strength and determination that surprised everyone at the sanctuary. He had volunteered for the most dangerous missions, always pushing himself harder than anyone expected, driven by his desire to protect Elena and create a world where they could be together without fear. The turning point came when they received word that King Marcus was planning something unprecedented. A messenger arrived at the sanctuary with news that chilled everyone to the bone. The king was organizing what he called the Great Purification, a systematic campaign to eliminate every magic user in the kingdom within a single month. "He's assembling armies from all the neighboring kingdoms," the messenger reported, a young woman named Sarah who had escaped from the capital just days before. "Kings who fear magical uprising in their own lands are sending soldiers to help. They plan to sweep through every village, every town, every city, and kill anyone with even a hint of magical ability." The news sparked furious debate among the sanctuary's residents. Some wanted to flee to distant lands, beyond the reach of any kingdom's army. Others argued for hiding deeper in the mountains, waiting for the storm to pass. But Elena had a different idea, one that both terrified and inspired everyone who heard it. "We don't run, and we don't hide," she announced during a gathering of the sanctuary's leaders. "We take the fight to them. We show the kingdom that magic users aren't helpless victims to be hunted down. We prove that we're citizens who deserve protection, not persecution." Morwen studied Elena carefully. "What exactly are you proposing, child?" Elena took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would change everything. "We saved the king's daughter." The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone in the sanctuary knew the story of Princess Catherine, King Marcus's only child. 3 weeks earlier, the princess had been struck down by a wasting disease that the kingdom's best physicians couldn't cure. She lay dying in the royal palace while her father's rage at his helplessness drove him to even greater extremes in his war against magic users. "You want to heal the daughter of the man who's trying to kill us all?" Flynn asked incredulously. "Think about it," Elena continued, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "The king hates magic because he fears it, but he also fears it because he doesn't understand it. If we can save his daughter's life, if we can show him that magic can be used for good, maybe we can change his mind about the purges." Thomas stepped forward to stand beside Elena. "It's dangerous, but it's also brilliant. If we can cure the princess, we'll have leverage. The king will owe us a debt that even his hatred can't overcome." Morwen shook her head slowly. "Children, you don't understand what you're proposing. The royal palace is the most heavily guarded fortress in the kingdom. Captain Blackwood and his hunters patrol every corridor. Even if you could somehow get inside, how would you get close to the princess? And if you're caught?" "If we're caught, we die," Elena said simply. "But if we do nothing, we all die anyway during the Great Purification. At least this way, we're dying for something worthwhile." The debate continued for hours, but eventually Elena's plan won support from enough of the sanctuary's leaders to move forward. They spent 2 weeks preparing, gathering intelligence about the palace layout, studying the guard rotations, and developing multiple escape routes. Thomas would accompany Elena into the palace, along with 2 other volunteers, Sarah, whose knowledge of the palace proved invaluable, and Marcus Flynn, whose skills as a former guard would be essential for getting them inside. The rest of the sanctuary's fighters would create diversions around the capital, drawing attention away from the palace during the rescue attempt. The night they left the sanctuary, Morwen pulled Elena aside for a final conversation. "Child, I want you to understand something important. What you're attempting isn't just about saving one life, or even about stopping the purges. You're trying to change the fundamental relationship between magic users and the rest of society. If you succeed, you'll become a symbol of something new. If you fail, If we fail, at least we'll have tried, Elena replied. Grandmother always told me that the only real failure is refusing to help when help is needed. The journey to the capital took 3 days of hard travel through back roads and forest paths. As they approached the city walls, Elena could see the evidence of King Marcus's growing paranoia everywhere. Guard towers had been doubled, soldiers patrolled the streets in groups of 6 or more, and wanted posters with her description were nailed to every public building. Getting into the palace required all of Flynn's knowledge and Sarah's inside information. They entered through an old drainage tunnel that connected to the palace kitchen's waste system. It was filthy, dangerous work, crawling through narrow pipes filled with decades of accumulated grime, but it brought them inside the palace walls without triggering any alarms. Once inside, they had to navigate through servant corridors and storage rooms, avoiding guards and palace staff who might raise questions about unfamiliar faces. Sarah led them through a maze of passages that she had learned during her time as a kitchen maid, before her own magical abilities had forced her to flee. The princess's chambers were on the 3rd floor of the palace's east wing, in a section that was usually heavily guarded. But the king's grief had made him unpredictable, and he had dismissed most of the princess's guards, preferring to sit by her bedside himself. This gave Elena and her companions an opportunity they might never have again. They waited in an empty storage room until well past midnight, when the palace settled into its deepest sleep. Then, moving like shadows, they made their way to Princess Catherine's chambers. Elena's first sight of the princess broke her heart. Catherine was perhaps 16 years old, with golden hair and delicate features that spoke of royal breeding. But the wasting disease had ravaged her young body, leaving her skeletal and pale, barely breathing as she lay surrounded by silk pillows and expensive medicines that had proven useless. King Marcus sat in a chair beside his daughter's bed, his head in his hands. Elena had expected to see a monster, the cruel tyrant who had ordered the deaths of so many innocent people. Instead, she saw a broken father watching his child die, and, despite everything he had done, her heart went out to him. Moving carefully, Elena approached the bed. The king looked up as she entered the circle of lamplight, and his face went through a dozen emotions in rapid succession: surprise, recognition, rage, hope, and, finally, a desperate kind of acceptance. "You're her," he whispered. "The healer they've been hunting. You're Elena of Millbrook." "Yes, your majesty," Elena replied quietly. "I'm here to help your daughter." King Marcus's hand moved toward his sword, then stopped. "Why? After everything I've done to your people, why would you help me?" Elena knelt beside the bed and placed her hand gently on Princess Catherine's forehead. The girl's skin was burning with fever, and Elena could sense the disease eating away at her from the inside. It was unlike anything she had encountered before, but she could feel how to fight it. "Because she's innocent," Elena said simply. "And because healing is what I do. It's who I am. Your hatred can't change that." As Elena began to work, drawing the sickness out of Catherine's body and replacing it with her own healing energy, King Marcus watched in fascination and growing wonder. He had seen court wizards perform impressive tricks, had witnessed battles won through magical power, but he had never seen magic used purely to help another person, with no thought of reward or recognition. The healing took hours. Elena poured everything she had into saving Catherine's life, feeling her own strength drain away as she battled the disease. Thomas stood guard at the door while Flynn and Sarah watched the corridors, ready to signal if anyone approached. As dawn broke over the capital city, Princess Catherine opened her eyes for the first time in weeks. Her fever had broken, her breathing was strong and clear, and the color had returned to her cheeks. She looked up at Elena with confusion and gratitude. "Father," she whispered. "I feel better. Much better." King Marcus stared at his daughter, tears streaming down his face. Then, he looked at Elena, who was swaying with exhaustion from the healing effort. "You saved her," he said in amazement. "You actually saved her." Elena nodded weakly. "She'll need rest and proper food, but the disease is gone. She's going to live a full, healthy life." King Marcus stood slowly, his mind clearly struggling to process what he had witnessed. "I don't understand. You could have demanded anything. A full pardon, safe passage out of the kingdom, an end to the purges. why didn't you negotiate first? Because a child was dying, Elena replied. That was more important than anything else. The king was quiet for a long moment, studying Elena's face. I've been wrong, he said finally. Terribly, horribly wrong. I thought magic was about power and control, about challenging my authority. I never understood that it could be about this. Thomas helped Elena to her feet as she swayed with exhaustion. Your Majesty, we should go. Dawn is breaking, and there will be questions if we're discovered here. But King Marcus shook his head. No. You're not leaving as fugitives. You're leaving as heroes, with my protection and gratitude. He moved to his writing desk and began penning a royal decree. I'm ordering an immediate end to all persecution of magic users. Furthermore, I'm establishing a new position, Royal Healers, with Elena of Millbrook as the first appointee. Elena stared at him in shock. Your Majesty, I don't know what to say. Say you'll help me fix the damage I've done, King Marcus replied. Say you'll help me build a kingdom where people like you are valued, not feared. Say you'll teach me to be the kind of king my daughter deserves. As they left the palace that morning, walking openly through corridors where they would have been killed on sight just hours before, Elena felt a sense of completion that went beyond simple victory. She had not only saved a life and ended the purges, but had proven something important about the true nature of power. True strength didn't come from armies or crowns or the ability to force others to obey. It came from the willingness to help those who needed it, to put healing before hatred, and to believe that even the hardest hearts could be changed by acts of genuine compassion. Thomas walked beside her, his hand in hers, as they emerged into the morning sunlight. Behind them, Princess Catherine was laughing with her father for the first time in months, already planning how they would rebuild their kingdom into something better. Ahead of them lay a future full of possibility, where magic users could live openly and safely, where healing would be honored rather than feared, and where love could flourish without the shadow of persecution hanging over it. Elena smiled as she thought about her grandmother, wishing Martha could have lived to see this moment. But she knew the old woman would have been proud. Elena had taken her gift and used it not just to save one life, but to transform an entire kingdom. The king had sought her life, but the boy who loved her had helped her find something even more valuable, the power to change the world through courage, compassion, and the refusal to let hatred win. Their real adventure was just beginning, but Elena faced it without fear. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would meet them with Thomas by her side and the knowledge that sometimes the smallest act of kindness can topple the mightiest throne. The hunt was over, and healing had won.